Long before the American dream took root, it was an English nightmare. The story of Jamestown is not one of fireworks and freedom, but of rot, starvation, desperation, and survival. In this coming journey into early colonial life, we'll explore the damp and deadly world of the first permanent English settlement in North America, where dreams of gold were buried under mud and mosquitoes. We'll begin with a sensory immersion into the miserable daily life of the average colonist, then follow the unraveling of a tragic leader, wander into the eerie mystery of the lost colony, and finally contrast these horrors with the richness of Powhatan elite life just beyond the wooden palisade. Welcome, traveler, wherever you're listening from, whether nestled beneath warm blankets, drifting off in a quiet corner of the world, or simply letting the day melt slowly into the nighttime. Glad you're here. Before we begin our historical descent, feel free to leave a gentle comment telling me what time it is where you are. Maybe you're tuning in from a quiet suburb in the UK, or from a rainy rooftop in Seoul, or perhaps from the stillness of a midnight room in Minnesota. Instead, what you find is a rotting, half-constructed palisade fence, sagging tents, and the sickly groans of fellow passengers already stricken with disease. Everything, your clothing, your bedding, even your thoughts feels damp. And the food, moldy ship's biscuit, warm riddled peas, sometimes a bird, sometimes a rat. But most nights, nothing at all. A twisted ankle means days of lying in wet dirt, feverish and ignored. Death is not dramatic here, it is slow, quiet, and frequent. A man disappears one evening, and no one speaks of him again. The river water, which everyone drinks, is a trap. By winter, they will boil leather boots for soup and chew the bark from trees. Tidal salt mixes with waste runoff, slowly poisoning anyone who drinks it. But it is the only water there is. However far apart we may be, this moment is shared. Tonight, we raid traveling back to the earliest moments of English colonization in America, to a place you've likely heard of, but perhaps never truly pictured, Jamestown. As we leave the muddy campfires behind, let us now turn to one such figure, an unlikely leader thrust into an impossible situation. The others, too few in number and already weakened, cannot do it alone. Supplies dwindle, tempers rise. The days are long and uneventful until someone collapses, then another. It is a quiet, unhurried unpacking of how ordinary people once endured the extraordinary, and how history is so often built on days and nights that were anything but glorious. You might imagine prim settlers in wide hats, building sturdy wooden homes and planting rows of corn, and begin. But the reality? The air reeked of brackish water and rotting meat. The mud was thick and constant. Death came not from heroic battle, but from salt poisoning, dysentery, cold, and isolation. Life was, in a word, unlivable. But this is not a tale of excitement or survival triumph. So let's take a deep breath. Let the past unfold. Imagine. It is May of 1607. You are standing on the banks of the James River, the Virginia air thick and unfamiliar. Your shoes sink into damp, spongy earth, and the sunlight above feels strangely muted behind the wall of humid mist and buzzing insects. You've crossed the Atlantic expecting golden streets and a new Eden. The nights are worse. Mosquitoes arrive in swarms that hum against your ears until morning. The mud never dries. The gentlemen among you, unused to work, refuse to dig, plant, or build. There are no doctors, no proper shelter, no firm ground beneath your feet. A simple fever becomes fatal. The so-called starving time will come later, in 1609. But even now, the hunger creeps in. Rations are stretched until nothing remains. The Jamestown settlement was built on hope, but lived through despair. And you, in this imagined skin, would likely not last a week. But others did. They endured not out of strength, but because they had no other choice. Let us shift now from the many to the one. As our journey continues, we step quietly into the mind of a man both of privilege and of torment, Captain George Percy, the youngest son of the powerful Percy family. He was educated at Oxford and trained in the polite art of diplomacy and letters. His hands were not calloused, his frame not built for toil. He preferred writing to speaking and often documented the colony's struggles in calm, descriptive prose. His early letters are filled with quiet despair of bodies buried secretly at night to hide their number, of rot creeping into every corner of the encampment, of men dying not from native attacks, but from carelessness and hunger. Yet in 1606, like many second or third sons with no inheritance to claim, Percy boarded a ship and set sail for Virginia in search of something more adventure, opportunity, or perhaps just space to prove himself. Born in 1580 into the English nobility, Percy was never meant for hardship. His letters from later years are sparse, tinged with regret. He did not marry. He held no great office. Through his eyes, we see the slow-motion disaster of Jamestown not as a moment of national pride, but as a test of human endurance in the face of absolute desolation. And when he died in 1632, it was in obscurity, into a place where record stop, and silence speaks, the lost colony of Roanoke. What he found instead was Jamestown. At first, Percy served in a secondary role, watching his stronger, louder voices like John Smith's commanded attention. And then, in 1609, everything changed. The leaders fled or perished. The supply ship from England sank, and George Percy, gentleman of letters, suddenly found himself in command, leader of a dying colony entering the darkest season of its existence. He was a man born to command from comfort, forced to govern among decay. Hundreds of settlers, including women and children, slowly succumbed to starvation. Every source of food was gone. Rats and snakes disappeared. The bark of trees was stripped bare. Eventually, stories emerged of unthinkable measures. Percy, ever restrained in his writings, acknowledged them only briefly. Some have licked up the blood, which hath fallen from their weak fellows. This was the infamous Starving Tom. Percy described it without flair. He didn't need to embellish. His leadership was, by most measures, a failure, but who among us could have succeeded under such circumstances? He was not a builder or a soldier. After relief ships finally arrived, George Percy quietly returned to England. His body survived, but his spirit did not, yet his voice remains. His journals preserve the realities others refused to record. As we close the chapter on Percy's tragic stewardship, we now turn eastward beyond Jamestown's palisades and deeper into mystery. Let us drift further back now, to a moment before Jamestown, before the colony, before the starvation, before even the promise of permanence. Our next step takes us to the haunting silence of a mystery still unsolved, the lost colony of Roanoke. The soil resisted cultivation, and the island felt increasingly remote, even untethered from the world. It began, as many colonial endeavors did, with hope and ambition. In 1587, more than 100 English settlers, including women and children, set sail for the shores of what is now North Carolina. Their destination, Roanoke Island. They brought with them dreams of a new world life, perhaps a touch more polished than the rougher men of Jamestown decades later. They were meant to establish the first English colony in the Americas, an enduring outpost for Queen and Crown. What they found upon arrival was uncertainty. Supplies were short, relations with nearby native tribes strained. Their governor, John White, eventually sailed back to England in search of aid, leaving behind his daughter, his newborn granddaughter Virginia Dare, and every soul of the Roanoke settlement. 3 years passed before he returned, and when he did, there was nothing. He wrote not with fire, but with fog, uncertain of whether he'd lost them to violence or merely to time, that they died of starvation or disease, their bodies reclaimed by the dense forest and shifting sand. The image of empty cabins, overgrown paths, perhaps a child's toy left behind in the dust. Contrast that history rarely makes room for. Just beyond the muddy shoes of Jamestown, as settlers stood another world older, more prepared, and far more refined than most imagine. No final moments recorded, just a slow fading into the landscape. that they were attacked by hostile tribes or even Spanish agents from rival settlements. Or perhaps that they simply tried to sail away and vanished at sea. No settlers, no bodies, no signs of struggle. Just the word Croatoan carved into a fence post and the letters Crow scratched into a nearby tree. This is where the silence begins. Historians have offered many theories that the colonists were absorbed into local native tribes, most likely the Croatoan people of nearby Hatteras Island. But no evidence confirms any one story. No remains, no wreckage, only the whispers of possibility. The word Croatoan, so often repeated in modern retellings, is a quiet placeholder for absence. The great not knowing, John White never saw his daughter or granddaughter again. His journal entries reflect heartbreak cloaked in restraint, and so Roanoke lingers not as a story of drama, but of stillness. As we leave this quiet mystery behind, let us return to something more certain. Let us now explore the daily life of the Powhatan elite, and how survival meant something very different beyond the wooden walls of the English camp. Now, we return to the forest, not the one filled with echoes of the lost, but one teeming with life, rhythm, and a very different kind of order. Just beyond the palisade walls of Jamestown, a more established society thrived, the world of the Powhatan Confederacy. Imagine yourself waking beneath a woven mat roof, the morning light filtering through gaps in bark and reed. Your home, a yadkin, is warm from the embers of last night's fire. It smells of smoke, sweet grass, and cornmeal. Outside, the woods stir softly, dew on leaves, birdsong rising, the rustle of hide garments as others begin their day. If you are born into nobility, perhaps the son or daughter of a Powhatan sub-chief, your life is guided not by desperation, but by rhythm. Tasks are divided clearly by season, age, and status. You are not building survival from scratch, as the English are. You are inheriting a system, shaped by generations, fitted to the land. Food is abundant and varied. Fields of corn, beans, and squash stretch behind your home. The river offers fish, turtles, oysters. The forest yields nuts, berries, and game. You are taught to hunt with bow and arrow, to fish with nets woven by your elders, and when meals are shared, they are hot, clean, and nourishing, never scavenged from refuse or salted to dust. Your clothing is well suited to the climate, soft deerskin, tailored and decorated with shells and beads, unlike the stiff wool of English coats. Your garments move with you. You are not weighed down. You walk easily through your world, and your society is deeply hierarchical but not without its own refinement. At the top sits Wahunsenok, whom the English will call Chief Powhatan. He governs not a single tribe, but a confederacy of more than 30. His power is spiritual, political, and ceremonial. He rules from Moro-Vokomoko, a site adorned with sacred mounds and palisades not unlike Jamestown, but far older. Your family respects the balance of seasons, the position of the sun and moon, the flow of tides. Stories are passed down around fires, not written in journals, but held in memory and told with care. Music, dance, and ritual are not luxuries, they are structure, sustenance for the spirit. To the English, your world appears wild and disordered, but to you, they are the ones who seem more men who dig where nothing grows, who starve while food surrounds them, who refuse to adapt. You have seen them, pale, sunburned, dragging half-built carts through mud. You've watched them fumble through your forests, loud and clumsy. You've heard of their diseases, their guns, their hunger. Some of your people speak their language now. Some have traded with them. Some have fought. But still, your life continues. You are grounded in tradition. The woods protect you. The river feeds you. And unlike those within the English fence, you sleep knowing where you are and who you are. As the segment closes, you may reflect on this quiet contrast, the settlers, huddled in their damp huts, dreaming of survival, and the Powhatan elite, walking barefoot along forest paths. They've walked all their lives, and now, as we come gently to the close of this journey, let us drift one last time through the landscapes we've explored tonight, from the muddy banks of the James River We stepped into the weary shoes of a Jamestown colonist, thirsty, hungry, and unsure if the sun would rise on another day. We witnessed how the foundations of early America were not laid with certainty or strength, but with trembling hands and whispered prayers. Then we followed the soft-spoken footsteps of George Percy, a nobleman caught in the tide of calamity, whose ink-stained records became the quiet testament of a colony's slow undoing. From there, we wandered further back into mystery, the abandoned cabins of Roanoke, the tree-marked Croatoan, the unspoken silence that still lingers centuries later. Sometimes history does not shout, sometimes it simply vanishes. And finally, we turned our gaze beyond the walls, beyond the suffering, and into the forest. There, the Powhatan world offered rhythm, structure, and contrast, not a paradise, but a place where survival did not feel like punishment. A reminder that the land, long before the arrival of ships, already held civilizations with their own wisdom, their own wealth. It is a quiet truth that while some grasped for empire, others had already found belonging. As you lie back now, eyes perhaps heavy, breath slowed with the passing of time, know that the stories we've shared tonight are not meant to rouse, but to root, to remind us that history is not only found in battles and declarations, but in the ordinary hours that filled the space between, in quiet hunger, in quiet perseverance, in quiet lives lived long before we arrived. May your rest be deeper than the mud of Jamestown, lighter than the fog over Roanoke, and gentler than the dawn mist rising through the forests of Virginia. Sleep well, traveler. Welcome, gentle listener. Wherever you are, perhaps resting in a quiet room after a long day, or curled beneath a blanket as the night gently hums outside, I invite you to settle in. Tonight, we'll take a soft, slow descent into the everyday life of those who live not in palaces or manors, but in the forgotten corners of Victorian England. The alleyways, the basements, the back rooms where history rarely lingers. If you'd like, you can leave a comment below to share where in the world you're listening from. Whether it's early morning in California, a quiet midnight in Jakarta, or dusk settling in across the UK, I'm grateful to share this peaceful moment with you. Breathe deeply. Let the outside world fall away. Our journey begins not with royalty or empire, but with cold dust, cold walls, and the rhythm of survival. Imagine, the year is 1864. You awaken not to birdsong or morning light, but to coughing. Your own, your brother's, and the sharp bark of your father who hasn't stood straight in weeks. The air inside your one-room home is warm from breath, thick with soot and human presence. The walls are damp, the floor, hard and unforgiving, is shared by 6 people, none of whom have changed clothes in days. Outside, dawn struggles to break through the soot-choked sky. You are not in the countryside or a distant village, but in London, only a few streets away from gaslit theaters and carriages. Yet here, you may go days without a real meal. Bread is cheap, but not always fresh. Porridge is thinner now, stretched with more water than grain. Meat, if it comes, is shared between too many mouths. Hunger becomes a normal presence, not a panic, but a dull and familiar ache that shapes your thoughts. Your work begins early. If you are a child, perhaps you sweep chimneys, your small frame forcing you into dark vertical spaces where soot clings to your eyelashes and lungs. Or maybe you're a mudlark, searching the Thames for coins and salvage barefoot, stepping through broken glass and waste. If older, perhaps you sort bones, pull hair from hides to make wigs, or carry bricks across narrow scaffold beams. Your mother fetches water from a pump at the corner, which may run brown today, or not at all. She boils it anyway for tea, for washing, for the illusion of clean. The waste from nearby tenements pools in the gutter. Rats are common, but they keep to themselves. Fleas and lice are more personal. If illness comes in, it often does, it spreads fast. You know families who have vanished in a week. There is no privacy, no medicine. Doctors don't come here. The clergyman, perhaps. The inspector, rarely. Neighbors help if they can. But most are surviving by the thinnest of margins. Your clothing is patched, often second or third hand. Shoes may have holes. The chill in winter comes from within, from the dampness that clings to your lungs, to your mattress, to your thoughts. And the noise never ends. Footsteps above, children crying next door, street vendors shouting, drunks stumbling, dogs barking. Silence, when it comes, feels unfamiliar. Despite it all, there is routine. The baker opens each day. The rag-and-bone man passes at the usual hour. The rhythm of survival continues. There are moments of laughter, a warm loaf shared, a song hummed at the end of the night. But if you, dear listener, were dropped into this life without preparation, without conditioning, you likely wouldn't last more than a few days. The smells, the noise, the hunger, the exposure would overwhelm. And yet, millions did live this way, every day, quietly enduring, quietly persisting, as we leave the narrow stairwells and smoky corners of the slum behind. Let us now shift to a man who tried on paper to map these lives. A man who walked these streets not with sympathy, but with structure. Charles Booth. In the waning decades of the 19th century, as industrial London swelled and its skyline blackened with soot, one man took to its streets with a notebook in hand. His name was Charles Booth, and though he was neither politician nor priest, he carried with him a quiet conviction that poverty could be measured, mapped, and understood not through poetry or pity, but through data. Booth was not born into hardship, a successful businessman from Liverpool. He had little first-hand experience with the slums he would later document. But in a time when British society debated whether poverty was the fault of the poor or a consequence of circumstance, Booth sought to settle the matter by walking slowly, thoroughly through the very neighborhoods that others ignored. Beginning in 1886, he commissioned researchers, including school board visitors and police officers, to accompany him on surveys throughout the city. Together, they traversed street after street, recording not just income, but impressions. Each home was labeled according to a spectrum of color-coded categories ranging from upper middle and upper classes, wealthy, to lowest class, vicious, semi-criminal. With these notes, Booth created maps, beautiful in their clarity, yet unsettling in what they revealed. Swaths of black and dark blue spread across the East End. Streets only blocks apart were worlds away, and within these shaded lines, entire lives were reduced to class, behavior, and perceived moral value. At first, Booth's work shocked society. The educated elite, perhaps unaware or willfully ignorant, saw suddenly the sheer density of poverty surrounding their own neighborhoods. His maps, bound in volumes with accompanying analysis, became tools for discussion in Parliament, among reformers, and in social welfare circles. Yet as the years passed, the sharpness of Booth's lens softened. His early surveys spoke frankly of squalor, of cruelty embedded in economic structure. But later editions grew gentler, perhaps in pursuit of wider acceptance or in response to political pressure. His categorizations remain, but their edges were dulled. The language grew more distant. Booth's data, once radical, was absorbed into the bureaucratic machinery. It informed policy, inspired reforms, but also became a tool of control. By naming, it framed. By categorizing, it simplified. And Booth himself faded into history not as a revolutionary, but as a quiet functionary of late Victorian social inquiry, a man who tried to understand suffering through columns and keys. Today, his maps remain. You can view them online, delicate and meticulous, colored with precision. But behind each shaded street lies 100 families, each with a story Booth could never quite capture. His work gives us structure, but not the warmth of a kitchen fire, the sting of cold water, or the hush of a mother rocking a coughing child to sleep. From his careful lines and quiet footsteps, we now shift underground to the buried arteries of London, and the filth that forced even Parliament to hold its nose. Let us descend into the sewers and follow the tale of the great state. By the summer of 1858, London could no longer ignore its own stench. The River Thames, once the proud ribbon of trade and empire, had become a slow-moving soup of waste. Human refuse, animal remains, industrial runoff, all of it poured into the water unchecked. For years, The city had tolerated the smell, but that summer, it became something else, unbearable. The heat rose, the water level dropped, the sludge thickened, and the smell was so overwhelming the curtains were soaked in lime. Vinegar was sprayed across the walls of Parliament, and discussions were abandoned mid-sentence. For those living near the river banks, the air burned in the throat. Even the privileged could not escape it. It came to be known as the Great Stink, and in its own strange way, it changed everything. You see, London had long accepted death. Cholera outbreaks had claimed thousands. Infants died daily in the poorest neighborhoods. But smell the physical offense to comfort was what moved the government to act. A reminder that history does not always shift through principle, but through pressure. The man who would solve this crisis was Joseph Bazalgette, an engineer of calm precision. His solution was grand and unseen. A system of intercepting sewers, tunnels that would run beneath the city, collecting waste before it reached the river. Gravity would help carry it away, eastward, far beyond the sight and smell of London. Bazalgette's design was elegant. Brick-lined tunnels that spanned hundreds of miles. Pumping stations with ornate facades, blending beauty with function. Massive embankments along the Thames, which both hid the infrastructure and gave Londoners new places to walk. Construction took years. Thousands of laborers worked in silence underground, brick by brick. Accidents occurred. Gas leaked, the weight of the city pressed down from above. But still, the sewers grew. By the time the project neared completion, much of the population had already forgotten the stink. The river, though not clean, ran clearer. The air grew gentler. The city could breathe again. And yet, there is something curious in the story. That it was not disease, not the death of thousands, but a moment of olfactory discomfort that sparked the will to change. A quiet lesson in what a society chooses to notice and what it chooses to endure. Even today, Bazalgette's system remains beneath the streets. We do not see it, we do not speak of it, but we owe it the quiet comfort of modern urban life. As we now rise gently from the depths of the city's buried arteries, we step not back into the slum, but across the streets into another world entirely. Let us now explore the quiet rituals of those who live surrounded by velvet, warmed by polished hearths, yet bound by rules just as strict as those found in the slums. Now, let us cross from the soot-lined alley into a drawing room of another kind. The fire here burns clean, behind a polished grate of wrought iron. Every movement feels both restricted and rehearsed. You walk as you were taught. You sit as you were instructed. There is comfort here, but not freedom. Warmth, but not ease. The wallpaper is floral, perhaps imported, delicately faded with time. Arithmetic, enough to manage a household but not a ledger. Marriage is not a milestone of love, but a transaction and alignment of name, land, and lineage. A line of poetry underlined fiercely. A glance held a second too long. A sigh behind the curtains when the guests have gone. The quiet ache of a life lived by the clock, by the card, by the chime of the piano. Your future may be discussed while you pour the tea, while your parents weigh your dowry against your suitor's prospects. What you want is not often asked, and in time, even your own desires become quiet enough to ignore, and you realize that while your life differs from the slums, it is not wholly free from its own kinds of confinement. His maps colored the city in shades of despair and hope, revealing much, but not everything. His work remains as a mirror held up to a world that wanted to look away. Into parlors lit by oil lamps and softened with velvet. Their comfort was abundant, but always conditional. Social grace was both a skill and a burden. Behind every quiet smile was the hum of constrained expectations defined to name, too heavy to ignore. You've read Austen, but not Byron. Your voice matters, but only when spoken softly. A crisis of odor that, oddly enough, prompted progress. Different lives, joined by proximity and divided by design. As you close your eyes and drift away, may you carry with you not the sharpness of history, but its texture, the quiet weight of the past, resting soft against the present. And in the quiet beneath the city, among brickwork and tunnels built by forgotten hands, we found a strange kind of salvation. The sewer, the invisible system that made modern life possible, was born not from compassion, but from the need to breathe. How lives lived within the same city, sometimes just across the street, could be shaped by forces as rigid as stone, as invisible as scent. One speaks of a cousin's engagement, another of a scandal involving someone just far enough removed to discuss safely. Laughter is delicate, never loud, and all the while, your posture must remain upright, your gaze composed, your hands folded just so. There, life was measured in crusts of bread and hours of labor. Children crawled through chimneys. Mothers boiled tea with water fetched from pumps shared by a dozen homes. Every day was a negotiation with discovered hand every night. A fragile victory. A piano waits in the corner. Tea is being poured into bone china, and the silver spoons clink gently, measured, rehearsed, practiced. You are in the home of a Victorian socialite. Not among the nobility perhaps, but near enough. Your dress is tight corseted, bodiced, layered with lace. The drawing room is a stage. Guests arrive promptly. Conversation dances between the weather, the opera, and letters received. The house may have 6 or 7 rooms, each managed quietly by servants who are never to be seen during the visit. Downstairs, coal is shoveled, linens are ironed, bread is warmed. Upstairs, none of this is spoken of. A misplaced word or fumbled teacup might mark you as vulgar. In this world, presentation is not merely etiquette, it is survival. You are educated, but only within bounds. French, perhaps. Music, certainly. For young women especially. Life is a gentle parade of expectations. And yet, even in this world of satin gloves and scented letters, there are quiet rebellions. You are comfortable but observed, respected but restrained. The house itself creaks gently as night settles in. The fire dims. The tea has gone cold. As we leave this parlor behind, the contrast lingers, not to condemn, but to consider. And now, as our quiet walk through Victorian London comes to an end, let us pause not to marvel, but to reflect. We began this journey not in Parliament or palace, but on the damp stone floor of a slum, where the air pressed down and every breath carried the weight of coal smoke and closeness. Then we followed the path of Charles Booth, who tried, in earnest and with pen in hand, to give structure to that suffering. From there, we descended underground into the foul depths of the great state, and finally, we stepped into warmth. So now, as the imagined lights of London dim, and the city's heartbeat slows beneath your breath, we end our journey. A slum dweller and a socialite may never have spoken, but they both understood routine, silence, waiting, and the feel of cold against the skin. Let this story stay with you, not as drama, but as whisper. Sleep well. Until our next slow walk through forgotten time. Welcome, listener. Whether you stumbled upon this video as the night settles in, or you're quietly easing into sleep beneath the still air of morning, I invite you to take a breath. In this moment, you are not hurried. You are not expected to remember anything. You are simply here, sharing a quiet journey through time. Feel free to let me know, gently, in the comments, what time is it where you are. Are you drifting with the late-night winds of the Pacific coast, or wrapped in soft blankets somewhere in America? Tonight, we go far back over 2,000 years to the sun-baked plains of Laconia, to Sparta. But not the Sparta of action films and epic battles. This is the quieter Sparta. The cold floors, the echoing dormitories, the long silences between drills, the version that rarely shouts, but always watches. Imagine waking up on a woven mat, the stone beneath your spine still cool from the night. You're not in your family's home. You're in a barracks with 20 other boys, all close to your age. You are 7. The room is dark, lit only by a slit in the clay wall where the morning sun begins to slide in. There is no blanket. There is no gentle call to rise. You know the moment you stir, the day's tests begin. You are in the Agage, the state's training system for male Spartan children. You've been placed here by decree. not choice. You left your mother behind with only a nod. Your father offered no embrace. Affection is a private thing here. You were told that this would shape you, that discomfort builds character, that pain is the tool of discipline. Breakfast is thin, sometimes broth, sometimes barley. Often, it's just enough to keep you alert. The hunger is not accidental, it is part of the training. You are expected to learn cleverness to steal food. But if you're caught, you're beaten. Not for theft, but for failure. You learn to move silently, to speak only when addressed. You learn to keep your eyes down when elders pass. Your days are long and regimented, marching without shoes, wrestling in dust, reciting hymns to the gods. You sleep when told, wake when ordered. Punishment is routine, swift, and impersonal. You are not raised to question. You are raised to endure. When injury comes, and it often does, it is not coddled. A twisted ankle must be walked off. A blackened eye becomes a mark of honor. The instructors never shout. Their voices are low, calm, unyielding. Their patience is not kindness, but control. You are taught that Sparta is all, that your life belongs to the state, that love, comfort, ease, these are weaknesses meant to be burned away like rust. Even at 7, you understand this. There is companionship, yes. You learn the names of the boys beside you. You learn to move as one. But there is no tenderness, no singing before sleep. No playful teasing, only the shared quiet of exhaustion and the cold stone that welcomes you each night. And yet, you do not cry. You don't remember how. As we rise from the dust of this imagined youth, let us turn to one who walked these same paths, yet ascended far beyond them, a Spartan king, small in stature, limping, but long in memory. His name was Agesilaus. In a city where physical perfection was worship and strength was a civic duty, Agesilaus was not an obvious candidate for greatness. He was born into nobility, yes, but with a slight frame and a visible limp, a condition many Spartans would have seen as a flaw. Yet in Sparta, fate often followed strange paths. His older half-brother, King Agis II, died without a strong heir, and through a series of quiet political maneuvers and family ties to the powerful Lysander, Agesilaus found himself not merely a citizen, but king. He did not rule from a throne of grandeur. Sparta had no such seat. There were no palaces, no grand courts. A Spartan king walked beside soldiers, dined on the same rations, and shared in the same chill winds that swept through the camp. Agesilaus embraced this fully. He traveled light. He slept on the ground. His cloak was no finer than any man's. He ruled for over 40 years. During that time, he led campaigns across Asia Minor, defended against revolts in Thebes, and struggled to maintain the Spartan dominance that had briefly flourished after the Peloponnesian War. But the world was changing. Athens was recovering. Thebes was rising. And Persia, ever the distant storm, grew bolder. As Sparta's grip weakened, Agesilaus aged. His body slowed, though his mind remained sharp. He wrote letters short, precise, rarely emotional. He lost friends to war and time. His reforms were met with resistance. He fought not only enemies abroad, but unrest at home. The city he led was a shrinking one. Its citizen population declined. Its rigidity became a burden. The helots, the enslaved laborers who sustained the Spartan machine, resented their fate more openly. The structure that had held firm for centuries began to creak under its own weight. And still, Agesilaus persisted. He left Sparta in his old age, hired out as a mercenary commander in Egypt, a symbol of Sparta's changed fortunes. There, far from the olive trees and dusty training fields of Laconia, he died quietly. No final battle, no grand speech, just the end of a life defined by discipline. He was brought home, eventually, and though the annals remember his name, few recall the loneliness of his reign, the long silences of a king whose very body contradicted the ideal he was meant to embody. Let us leave him now, in quiet, and walk toward the unanswered, toward the city he led, and the puzzles it left behind. Why did Sparta, so proud and precise, build no walls? Why does its gold, once abundant, seem to have vanished? There is a quiet strangeness to ancient Sparta and absence that echoes louder than presence. Unlike Athens or Corinth, with their towering marble temples and formidable walls, Sparta appears, in the archaeological record, almost reluctant. It is not that the Spartans lacked resources or skill. They simply chose to build differently or not at all. Imagine walking toward the heart of the Spartan polis and its prime. You pass olive trees rustling softly in the warm breeze. You expect to see high walls. Every city had them, after all. But here, there are none. No stone towers, no fortified gates, no battlements rising from the earth. The philosopher Xenophon, who lived among the Spartans, wrote that Sparta's walls were its citizens. Their discipline, their military precision, their unflinching obedience that was the barrier between Sparta and its enemies. King Agesilaus himself is said to have scoffed at walls, believing that reliance on stone bred weakness, and so the city stood open. But the mystery goes deeper. At the height of its power, Sparta commanded immense wealth. Tribute poured in after the Peloponnesian War, gold from conquered cities, offerings from allies, spoils of war. Yet very little of this wealth seems to have remained. Unlike other cities of the ancient world, there are no grand treasuries to unearth, no hoards of coins buried beneath sanctuaries, no lavish estates dotting the countryside. Some scholars believe the wealth was never truly stored. Perhaps it passed quickly through Spartan hands, spent on short-lived campaigns or dispersed in poorly documented transactions. Others speculate that it was hidden deliberately, perhaps lost in the soil or spirited away during times of crisis. Some even suggest it was simply dissolved by the state's austere culture, burned on principle, rejected in favor of simplicity. Whatever the cause, Sparta left behind few material traces. No golden statues, no complex sewer systems, no libraries. Its roads were functional, its homes modest, its shrines unassuming. What remains is mostly earth, some scattered foundations, and the faded memory of a people who insisted that strength lay not in what you built but in what you could endure without. Even the bones of its heroes are sparse. Tombs were not monumental. Gravestones were plain. A city of warriors, reluctant to be remembered in stone. As we leave these empty spaces behind, we now descend one step further beneath the citizen body. To those who made Spartan life possible, but were never permitted to share in it, the Helots. Now, let us walk in quieter footsteps, far from the training grounds, far from the communal mess halls of Spartan youth. Here, in the lowlands and fields that stretch beneath Mount Tagetes, another kind of Spartan life unfolds. It is dawn. The mist has not yet burned off the barley fields, and you, a Helot, are already awake. You are not a citizen. You are not free. You are owned not by a master, but by the state itself. You cannot vote. You cannot leave. You cannot refuse. But you are essential. Crops you sow feed the warriors. The wine you press fills their cups. The wool you shear warms their cloaks. Your hands shape their world, even as your name is never spoken. You rise before the sun, your feet still sore from the previous day. Your hut is small, shared, and built from packed earth. The mornings begin with simple tasks: gathering water, feeding livestock, checking tools. But your mind remains alert. You never know when they might come. The Cryptia, a secret police of sorts, made up of young Spartans. Their task, to intimidate, to remind, sometimes to kill. Officially, their role is vague, but every Helot knows the meaning of their sudden appearance. A knock in the night, a shadow across the path, a neighbor who doesn't return. You tend your plot of land, though it does not belong to you. You are required to hand over a portion of the harvest. What remains is barely enough, and yet you continue planting, harvesting, repairing. The seasons pass in cycles of toil. Joy, when it comes, is cautious, a song shared quietly, a fire burned low, laughter that ends quickly when footsteps approach. Some Helots resist, some escape to the mountains, others pass stories down quietly. At night of a time when their ancestors were free, some are allowed to serve as attendants to Spartan families. A rare few are granted freedom for service in battle. But most are born, live, and die in this shadowed role. And still, life persists. Children are born. Bread is baked. Tools are mended. Even under constant surveillance, there is routine. There is a kind of strength that grows not from armor or oaths, but from repetition, from surviving. As we close this final chapter, we are left with a strange balance, a society that worship order, powered by those it tried to erase. The silence of the helots made the clatter of Spartan shields possible. Their stillness allowed others to march. Now, we return to the stillness to reflect on the world we've just seen. And so, with our feet dusted in the red earth of Laconia and our breath slowed by the quiet weight of history, we come to the end of our journey through Sparta, not the Sparta of legend, but the Sparta that breathed, suffered, and endured. We begin not with heroism, but hardship waking alongside a 7-year-old boy, shaped not by love, but by discipline. A child learning to speak less, endure more, and sleep without softness. Then we followed Agesilaus, the limping king whose life stretched long and far, but ended in distant exile. His story, like many Spartan tales, was not one of glory, but of gravity, a man slowly swallowed by a city's fading strength. From there, we wandered through the absences, the missing walls, the missing gold, a city that defined itself by what it refused to build. And in those empty spaces, we found a different kind of mystery, not one of conspiracy, but a principle, a pride that shaped not only stone, but memory. And finally, we looked through the eyes of those whose names rarely survived, those who rose with the sun and knelt in the fields, whose labor made the Spartan state function. The helots, their stories are quieter, often lost, but no less human. Now, as your breath softens and your thoughts begin to drift, you might imagine the stone piles of ancient Sparta emptying for the night, the training yards quiet, the fields dark. Somewhere, a low fire still burns. Somewhere, someone is watching the stars. And here, in the present, you are safe. You are warm. You are far from the call of the agage, the cold of the fields, or the silence of exile. Rest now, traveler. Sleep deeply. And when you wake, let the echoes of the past remain gentle shadows in your dreams. Hello, and welcome to another slow journey into the distant past. Wherever you're listening from, perhaps under thick blankets or during a quiet commute through early light, I invite you to let your body rest and your breath settle. Tonight's story is dry, wine-worn, and full of footsteps. We'll walk softly through the Gobi Desert, not as conquerors or merchants, but as those who live between them, the camel tenders. Men and boys who knew the desert not as an idea, but as a daily fact. As always, you're welcome to leave a comment sharing where and when you're listening. Are you resting under a ceiling fan in UK? Or hearing this beside a winter window in Alberta? No matter where you are, I'm grateful you're here. And now, let's begin quietly and with dust. You wake up in the dark. There are no walls, just a thin tent, pressed close by wind. The air is dry enough to crack your lips before you speak. Your throat is already sore. Around you, the camels stir. They grunt, belch, and shift their heavy bodies in the sand. You rise slowly. Every motion feels heavier in this cold. You wrap yourself in wool, tug on cracked boots, and begin the day with silence. Breakfast is simple: stale bread, a handful of dried goat meat, maybe some fermented milk if there's any left. Water is precious, pulled from a well 2 days ago and kept warm in a leather pouch. Tucked against your chest at night, you don't drink much, just enough to keep the headache at bay. The sun begins to rise, and you move quickly. Camels are patient, but stubborn. You check their legs for sores, secure their packs, deep bricks, textiles, dried fish, let her Zan fall into rhythm. Sometimes you ride, but mostly, you walk. The wind shifts, and the sand comes with it. Fine grains settle into every fold of clothing, every crack of skin. You try not to wipe your eyes too much, it only makes it worse. There are no signposts here, only the memory of others' paths. You follow landmarks, distant peaks, bleached bones, rock cairns left by someone long gone. You walk for hours, Your ears ring in the silence. The heat creeps in slowly, and then all at once. Your companions are few. A cousin, perhaps. A hired guide. You speak rarely. Voices dry the throat. You point, nod. Watch the camels for signs of fatigue. Their breathing tells you more than words. When a sandstorm rolls in, there is no shelter. You wrap your face and hunker down. The air becomes thick. Your teeth grind with grit. Sometimes a camel panics. Sometimes one falls. If it dies, you mark the spot, unload what you can, and move on. At night, the cold returns. The stars are sharp. Your body aches. The silence is not peaceful, it is total. There are no birds, no trees, no rustling leaves. Only the low breath of animals and the creak of ropes. And this is every day. For weeks, sometimes months. Across a desert not empty but vast. Alive with invisible hazards. Brigands, wells gone dry. Paths lost in drifting dunes. You are paid little. You are remembered less. And yet, you continue. Because there are no other options. Because the goods must move. Because someone must lead the caravan forward. Now, as we leave these shifting sands behind, we follow the footsteps of another traveler. One who crossed the same deserts not for trade, but for wisdom. A monk named Zhuangzang, walking toward India. He left in the dark, quietly, against imperial orders. Zhuangzang was not a warrior or trader, but a monk, one man, wrapped in coarse robes, carrying only a few scrolls and a deep need to know. It was the year 629, and he walked out of Chang'an not toward safety, but toward sand, toward silence, toward the deserts that would strip away everything but intent. He sought scripture's texts not found in China, teachings untouched by translation. But first, he had to cross the Gobi. His early days were marked by solitude. The Gobi is not cruel in the way of stories, it is quiet, deliberate. It does not kill quickly, but wears you down. Zhuangzang faced days without water, nights where his only shelter was the curve of a rock. He recorded hallucinations of voices, of mirages, of movement where nothing moved. Once, he lost his way. His horse died. He continued on foot. The heat blurred the horizon. He carried a small image of the Buddha beneath his robe, pressing it to his chest when doubts set in. He walked for weeks. He passed ruined towers, collapsed wells, and bones sun-bleached into near transparency. Sometimes, he found caravans. Sometimes, he was refused water. Other times, a stranger offered him dry dates and a place by the fire. In one oasis, he waited 6 days for a sandstorm to pass, meditating beneath palm leaves as wind howled overhead. But always, he continued. He eventually reached the kingdom of Gaochang, where he debated philosophy with kings. Later, he crossed the far more dangerous Taklamakan, traversing its lifeless heart with only his faith and a guide. His journey continued for years through mountain passes, foreign temples, and elephant-filled forests of northern India. And when he returned to China, nearly 2 decades later, he did not bring gold or jewels. He brought sutras, teachings, ideas written on silk and bark and memory. His story was copied in the scrolls, read by emperors, read by poets. But the desert portion, the long walk through endless, trackless wind, that part remains quiet. That part was never embellished, because the truth of it was already enough. Let us leave him there, beneath stars that watched but never judged. And let us now shift to the sand beneath his feet, to the cities that once welcomed him, and now lie buried beneath the desert itself. Now we walk not with merchants or monks, but through the remnants of a forgotten city, Lulan. Once nestled at the edge of the Gobi Desert, Lulan was a quiet jewel of the Silk Road, a city of canals and carved beams, of scribes and soldiers, a place where travelers once rested, where ink flowed across wooden slips and water trickled past homes made of mud brick. Now, it is silent. There are no footsteps, no laughter in its courtyards, only wind. Lulan thrived nearly 2,000 years ago. Its people were linen and fur. They spoke languages now pieced together from fragments. They knew trade and governance. They built reservoirs, laid out streets, and scribbled letters on birch bark, yet today, little remains, a few beams, warped by time, the imprint of a wall, a shoe, a grave beneath dry sand. What happened? The river that sustained the land once steady shifted. Maybe it dried slowly, over decades. Maybe a single earthquake turned its course. The desert, patient and always watching, moved in. Crops failed. Dust settled. Families left, one by one, until only wind remained. There are no chronicles of the city's fall, no battle, no fire, just absence. Archaeologists began exploring the land in the early 20th century. What they found were strange combinations: shoes with turned-up toes, documents in multiple scripts, combs still fine-toothed after centuries, a letter written by a soldier to his family never delivered. These are not ruins in the classical sense. There are no columns, no domes. But in Llewellyn's silence, there is intimacy, the kind that comes not from spectacle, but from small things left behind. And Llewellyn was not alone. The desert is dotted with such stories, oases that once hosted princes, outposts that buzzed with traders, antique caravans. Now they are mounds, sometimes mistaken for dunes. The Silk Road was not one path, but many, and some of those paths now sleep beneath sand. As we step softly out of Llewellyn's empty lanes, let us turn to another side of this story. Not toward the wind and thirst, but toward comfort, toward porcelain cups, measured steps, and the practiced leisure of Tang Dynasty elites who lived far from the dust. Now we drift eastward, past the mountains and rivers that frame the desert's edge, into the walled cities of the Tang Dynasty. Here, life follows a different rhythm. The dust of the Gobi fades into distant memory, replaced by swept courtyards, red lacquered doors, and garden paths lined with jasmine and stone lanterns. If you were born to privilege in Chang'an or Luoyang, your day began not with cracked lips or saddled camels, but with silence and tea. The homes of scholar officials were not ostentatious. They were measured, balanced. Floors were polished wood, walls adorned with calligraphy. Morning light filtered gently through bamboo screens. A servant would bring warm water for washing, then a tray of breakfast-steamed buns, pickled vegetables, perhaps a little millet porridge. The house would already be filled with the scent of sandal wood and boiled ink. Your responsibilities were few, but exacting. You might spend hours composing poetry, practicing brushwork, or playing a zither beneath the trees. Conversations were soft. Evenings might include a gathering of French courtesy at the forefront, laughter tucked into pauses. Guests would sip tea poured into cups no larger than walnuts, commenting on its fragrance, the slope of its steam, the warmth of the glaze. You wore robes of silk layered with care, dyed in soft earth tones. Each fold held meaning, each gesture had place. And though your life was free of desert wind, it had its own kind of discipline. You must speak correctly, bow correctly, feel the weight of reputation like a second garment. Outside the city walls, camel caravans passed bringing jade, incense, scrolls, and spices. But their dust never reached you. The hardship that powered the empire remained distant, a flicker on the edge of thought. You might write a verse about the western frontier, but your feet would never touch it. Even within wealth, there was silence. A scholar might spend hours copying a single character, finding joy in the curve of a line. A woman might tend bonsai, her hands moving with patience. In this world, the clamor of trade faded. In its place, soft robes brushing tile, the sound of water ladled into a clay basin, the sigh of a fan opening in spring. And while the desert moved, erasing cities, here the air barely stirred. Here, peace was preserved not by strength but by etiquette and time. As we close this final segment, let us now step away from silk and sand alike and into reflection. Now, as the wind settles and the lanterns dim, we reach the final stretch of this journey, a journey that began beneath the wide, empty sky of the Gobi Desert and ended in the quiet inner chambers of Tang Dynasty refinement. We walked first with the camel tender, silent, sun-baked, half forgotten. We felt the dryness in our mouths, the pull of rope, The weight of a world moved not by engines, but by footsteps. His was a life lived entirely outdoors, entirely on the edge. Not romantic, not heroic, but steady, necessary. Then came Zhuangzang, the monk who crossed that same landscape not for gold or conquest, but for meaning. His journey unfolded one sand-covered footprint at a time. He did not speak often. He did not hurry. His presence, like the desert, was enduring, unfolding slowly into wisdom. From there, we paused at Lulan, no longer a city, but a suggestion, a place erased not by war, but by time and weather. Its silence was total, its artifacts gentle reminders that life once bloomed where now only sand shifts. A condatation, a letter. These are not relics, they are echoes. And finally, we entered stillness of a different kind. Tea poured in quiet rooms. Silk robes brushed across swept stone. In Chang'an, the air was scented, the words measured. While the world moved goods through hardship, the elite moved through ritual, different from the desert's struggle, but no less shaped by it. Each piece of this story was connected by a line of motion, by journeys taken, burdens carried, and breath held under harsh skies. And now, wherever you rest, perhaps on soft sheets in a room you know well, you can let the wind pass through you. Let the dust settle. Let the rhythms of long-forgotten lives carry you towards sleep. You have no camels to tend, no scrolls to fetch, no sand in your shoes, only stillness. Thank you for listening. Rest well, traveler. Welcome, traveler. Tonight, we leave behind the flickering lights of modern life and step softly into the sands of the ancient world. You may picture pyramids, gold, and grandeur, but the real Egypt, the everyday Egypt, was much quieter. It was warm stone beneath bare feet, the slow hum of the Nile, and the steady rhythm of ordinary people doing ordinary things. Before we begin, take a moment to breathe. Let your shoulders rest. And if you'd like, share in the comments where you are listening from, perhaps from a quiet bed in Canada, or while dusk sets over a balcony in Thailand. Wherever you are, this space is yours now. Let us walk back, gently, to the edge of the desert. You wake not to a clock, but to heat. The sun has already started to rise, painting the sky in faded terracotta and pale blue. You slept on a mat in a mud brick room, the air still heavy with last night's sweat and dust. Outside, other laborers are already stirring, tying cloth around their heads, collecting tools, drinking a mouthful of beer-thin gruel before work begins. Your job today is stone hauling. You walk to the quarry, feet coated in sand, eyes narrowed against the glare. The foreman calls your group together. You are part of a gang, maybe 10 men, some younger, some older. All of you lean, sun-browned, and quiet. There's no cheering, just routine. You push heavy sledges over packed earth. Wooden rollers groan. Your back aches before midday. There are breaks, yes, brief ones. Dates, bread, more beer. You eat under a woven canopy, shade barely enough to make a difference. The bread is dense and coarse, often filled with grit from the grinding stones. You chew slowly, not for pleasure, but for fuel. The tools are simple: bronze chisels, wooden levers, ropes frayed from use. Your hands are calloused, your fingernails cracked. When you drink water, it's warm, stored in clay jars. Still, it cools the tongue for a moment, and that is enough. You return to work, your skin tight with sweat and sand. By afternoon, the heat is relentless. You know the shade is hours away, and you don't count minutes. You count stones. You count steps. You count the number of times your body wants to stop but doesn't. At sunset, you return home. Your legs feel heavy. Your arms hum with exhaustion. You bathe with a jar of water poured slowly over your shoulders. Maybe your wife has cooked lentils. Maybe not. You eat in silence. You sleep without dreaming. And tomorrow, you'll do it again. Now, we shift from the dust of labor to the stillness of death. Let us enter a place where silence is sacred and every movement is performed with care. The tomb of a pharaoh sealed not with noise, but with ritual. The air inside the tomb is still, cool. Even in the desert, the flicker of an oil lamp dances gently along painted walls not bare stone, but lined with stories in ochre, black, and lapis blue. The gods move in procession. The king walks among them. The ceiling is dotted with stars, painted centuries ago by careful hands. This is not a place of fear. It is a place of order and preparation. Mummification begins not in a rush, but in silence. The body is received, washed, laid out upon a table carved from stone. The embalmer moves without flourish. He has done this many times. There is no chatter, only the sound of linen unrolling, of oils poured gently from alabaster, flasks of tools placed in sequence. First, the drying. Natron salt is packed within the body, drying it slowly over many days. Each step is part of a ritual, each cut, each placement. Organs are removed and carefully sealed in canopic jars. The heart, depending on custom, may be left in place, or taken and preserved. The brain, considered less important, is removed through the nose. Not hurried, not violent, just practiced. Then comes the wrapping. Hundreds of feet of linen, layered and neat. Amulets are placed between folds, tiny charms for protection, guidance, remembrance. A scarab rests over the heart. A tiny figure of Anubis near the hands. Prayers are recited in murmurs, not shouted, not sung. Just soft phrases and invocations to guide the soul safely to the western horizon. The tomb itself is being prepared in tandem. Furniture is arranged, food offerings sealed in jars, carvings checked, paints reapplied where needed. Nothing is left to chance. Death here is not chaos. It is continuity, a movement from one chamber to the next. Finally, the coffin, often nested like boxes within boxes, would polished, painted, inlaid with gold leaf or lapis. The face on the lid is serene, stylized, meant to resemble the king not as he was, but as he should be, eternal, youthful, divine. And then, the procession. Torches lead the way. Priests chant softly. The coffin is carried by men with solemn steps. It enters the tomb, is placed in the final chamber. Incense is burned. The door is sealed. It will not be opened again for centuries. Not until curious hands disturb the dust and light returns. But for now, in this moment, it is quiet. The work is done. The pharaoh sleeps beneath the desert. As we leave this sacred stillness behind, we journey next to another forgotten space, once sacred, then lost. A temple buried in silence, rediscovered beneath the shifting sands. Far from the Nile's familiar curve, in the dry oasis of Karga, rests a temple once hidden beneath the sand, the Temple of Ibis. Built during the late period of Egyptian history, it stood in honor of Ammon the Hidden One, and fittingly, it became hidden, swallowed over centuries by desert, wind, and time. When you walk toward it now, the path is hushed, the sand has retreated, but the silence remains. You step over loose stones, past crumbled outer walls, into an inner sanctuary where columns still rise like tired sentinels. The paint, faded but still soft, clings to carvings of gods and kings. Blues dulled to gray, golds faded to earth. Inside, there is no ceremony, only absence. Birds flutter overhead, startled by your shadow. A beam of sun slips through a missing roof tile, illuminating a single figure on the wall. A pharaoh offering incense to a deity whose name has been worn away. The temple was once a place of rhythm, offerings, chants, footsteps echoing through stone. Priests waking early to sweep the floors, to tend a flame, to recite words that had not changed in 1,000 years. But the desert came slowly. Winds picked at the walls, roofs collapsed, sand filled the courtyards, and the temple, like many others, simply vanished. Archaeologists rediscovered it in the 20th century, pulling back layers of wind-blown dust to find not treasure, but texture. They found inscriptions still legible, niches once filled with statues, a calendar etched on stone measuring festivals long since past. Each find a whisper, not a proclamation. And Ibis is not alone. All across Egypt, from Dakhla to Siwa, temples once full of music and incense now lie empty. Forgotten names carved beside doorways, stairs that lead nowhere, offerings left in clay pots, untouched for 2,000 years. These sacred places were never meant to disappear. But the desert is patient. It waits, it shifts, and eventually, it covers. As we step away from the temple's quiet breath, we return not to the stonebreakers or the royalty, but to the scholars. The ones who wrote, who copied, who sat quietly under shaded halls with papyrus in their lap. Let us now spend a gentle day with a temple scribe. The morning begins before the sun has crested the palm groves. In the shaded walkway of the temple's outer court, a scribe sits cross-legged on woven matting, his back straight, his hands steady. The limestone is still cool beneath him. The air carries a hint of baked grain and incense floating in from the inner sanctum. He dips his reed pen into a small dish of carbon ink and begins. His job is not dramatic. He records the arrival of grain, the names of donors, the phases of the moon. Sometimes he copies hymns. Sometimes he updates a scroll for festival preparations. Each stroke is deliberate, each character shaped with care. Mistakes are rare and gently corrected. He is not a priest, though he works beside them. He wears a clean linen tunic, his head shaved in the style of the temple. His tools are few: papyrus, ink, stylus, patience. His training took years. He learned not only the language of daily life, but the sacred script, the one reserved for gods, kings, and ceremony. He knows which signs are used for dates, which for blessings, which for sorrow. Around midday, he pauses for bread and figs. He sits in the shade, listening to the wind move through the colonnade. Sometimes he hears chanting from the sanctuary. Sometimes nothing but his own breath. The silence is not heavy. It is structured like the rest of his life. His room is small, but clean with a lamp, a low bed, a chest with scrolls. In the evening, he may walk along the Nile, sandals pressing softly into the dust. He greets others with a nod, exchanges few words. The river moves slowly beside him, reflecting stars. He does not build pyramids. He does not carry stone. His work is lighter, but just as lasting. Some of the scrolls he writes will be copied again and again. Others will be lost in floods or fire. He does not worry about legacy. He thinks about ink, about order, about the balance of lines. And in that balance, there is peace. Now, as we leave his quiet desk and return to the present, let us bring with us the rhythm, that steady hand, the cool breath, that slow unfolding of time. And now, with the Nile slipping back into the distance and the sand settling once more across the stones, our journey through ancient Egypt gently comes to rest. We began among the laborers, those whose backs bent beneath the weight of stone, whose hands were worn smooth by rope and tool, whose days passed not in glory, but in repetition. They built the world we now admire, but their names were seldom carved into it. From there, we stepped into sacred stillness, into a royal tomb, where death was prepared not with fear, but with ceremony. Every fold of linen, every drop of oil, every recited word meant not to mourn, but to continue. Life did not end in those chambers. It changed form. Next, we walked through silence older than memory. The buried temple of Hibish reminded us that worship leaves footprints even when time tries to erase them. Forgotten places still speak, not in shouts, but in textures, cracked paint, softened stares, a forgotten inscription tucked behind a column. And finally, we sat beside the scribe, not a warrior or a king, but a quiet steward of memory. He recorded offerings and hymns, seasons and names. His ink dried slowly, his breath even slower. His life was not lavish, but it was full-structured, calm, and built around the small beauty of clarity. Now, as you lie still, perhaps on soft sheets, perhaps just with your eyes closed in a quiet room, you carry none of their burdens. Your hands are empty. Your feet are warm. There are no stones to lift, no scrolls to copy, just the steady rhythm of your own breath and the soft comfort of the present. Let the weight of the past fall away now. Sleep well, traveler. Hello again. Wherever you find yourself tonight, perhaps wrapped in a warm blanket or listening through softly buzzing headphones, I welcome you back to another quiet descent into the past. Our journey this time is not far removed in centuries, but close enough that its echoes still murmur through brick and chimney. The Industrial Revolution changed everything, but not always gently. Before we begin, feel free to leave a comment. What time is it where you are? Are you listening from the soft dark of midnight or the calm of early morning before the sun has risen? No matter where or when, I'm glad you're here. And now, we step carefully onto a stone street slick with morning frost, where a small figure in worn shoes walks toward the looming shadow of a cotton mill. You are 8 years old, and the factory bell rings before the birds. Your shoes are thin, your fingers raw from yesterday. You walk quickly, quietly, head down, avoiding puddles that will soak through to your skin. The sky is still dim. The mill towers above you, brick, black windows, and a single chimney spilling smoke into a gray morning. Inside, the air is warm but not kind. It smells of oil and dust, old cloth and grease. The machines never stop. They spin, clatter, hiss. You cannot speak over them. You would not be heard. You walk between looms taller than you are, broom in hand, sweeping the lint that gathers on the floor. It coats your clothes, your lungs. You cough, quietly. No one notices. You are paid by the hour, but you do not count them. The hours blend together, only broken by the sharp bark of the foreman or the brief clang of a meal break. Lunch is short. Bread, sometimes cheese. Water, if you remember to bring it. There is no playground. No time to stretch. Only sitting when allowed. Only stillness when it doesn't look like laziness. You have been trained to clean the machines while they run. Your small hands can reach places grown men cannot. Sometimes you nick your fingers. Sometimes worse. You've seen it happen, seen the blood, seen the workers sent home. You don't ask what happened after that. By late afternoon, your head is heavy. The noise blends into a kind of hum, dull, relentless. You want to close your eyes, but you keep working. When the bell finally rings again, you walk home. The air outside is colder now, but you don't feel it as much. Your hands ache, your legs burn. But tomorrow you will be here again. You are not a student, not a child in the way we think now. You are labor, necessary, small, and silent. And yet, even among these thousands of unnamed children, one voice did make it to paper. Let us now walk alongside him, Robert Blanco, the mill boy who remembered. He was not famous when he lived, not powerful, not educated in the traditional sense. But Robert Blanco became, through quiet persistence and chance, the voice of many who had none. His story was written down not in his own hand, but through the listening and careful retelling of another. A life of labor, remembered in fragments. Robert was born in 1792, orphaned early. He was placed in the St. Pancras workhouse in London, a place meant to house and train the poor. When he was just 7 years old, he was sent north with other children, promised care, promised instruction. What he found instead was a cotton mill. He worked in Nottingham, 12 hours a day, sometimes more. He was assigned to the spinning frames, large machines with long rows of threads. His job was to clear blockages, replace bobbins, and keep everything running. There were no guards on the gears, no pauses for safety. Blanco recalled how often fingers were caught, how screams were met with silence. Punishment was routine, for falling asleep, for arriving late, for speaking. He remembered hunger most of all. Meals were basic: porridge, crusts of bread, sometimes none. He grew slowly. His back curved early. His hands never stopped shaking. And yet, through all this, he observed. He remembered. Years passed. He changed jobs, grew older, never truly left the mills. But in adulthood, his story reached ears willing to listen. A journalist, moved by Robert's recollections, helped shape them into a published account. The memoir of Robert Blanco was first circulated in the 1830s not as a cry for help, but as a mirror held up to a society already starting to shift. Blanco never asked for pity. His words were measured, the pain recounted plainly. His tone was quiet, like a man long past hoping to be saved, but still needing to be heard. His story, though not widely read in his lifetime, inspired reformers. Child labor laws followed in slow steps. The mills changed, and Robert Blanco faded into the background of history once again. But we remember him now not as a symbol, but as a boy who swept beneath the spinning frames and later told the truth. As we step away from his quiet voice, we now step into a different silence, the one that remains when the mills go dark. Let us walk now through a factory no longer filled with children, but with echoes. The gates are rusted now, the roof leaks. Vines curl along broken window panes where light filters through in long, golden beams. You stand in the doorway of a cotton mill long silent. Its last shift ended decades ago, but its presence remains a skeleton of industry. Hollowed and still, the air is cool inside. The smell of oil lingers faintly metallic and sweet. Dust lies thick on the floor. Footprints from past visitors fade into the corners. A row of machines stands idle, covered in cobwebs. The belts have stiffened, the gears no longer turn, but their weight is still there, like sleeping giants. You walk the long aisle where children once swept, where threads once ran in endless loops. The floor creaks gently beneath your steps. Above, paint peels from beams that once echoed with the voices of foremen and the hiss of steam. The silence here is deep, not empty, but layered with memory, with motion, with repetition now paused. A storage room still holds ledgers ink faded, pages curled at the corners, names, numbers, times. A girl's handwriting, neat and careful, listing bobbin counts from a century ago. A lunch pail left on a shelf, its lid rusted shut. A scrap of fabric folded into a forgotten apron. There is no plaque, no spotlight, just the quiet persistence of what remains. You climb narrow stairs to a loft once used for sorting cotton. The floor is uneven. The light shifts as clouds pass overhead. You hear birds now, nesting where workers once stood. Their wings stir dust that dances in the beams. These mills were loud once, relentless, but now they are museums of stillness. No admission fees, no tour guides, just brick and air and the sound of your own breath. And above these walls, just one floor above, there was another life entirely, a different rhythm. Let us now leave the abandoned factory floor behind and rise into the quiet drawing rooms of the owners who once lived above the looms. Now we ascend just one floor up, but a world away. Here, the walls are smooth and papered. The windows are clean, opening wide to let in the soft afternoon light. A fireplace crackles gently beneath a marble mantel. In the corner, a pianoforte waits with its lid closed, a lace cloth draped neatly across the top. This is the drawing room of the mill owner's home, connected to the factory, but sealed off from its noise. The rhythm of life here is quiet and polished. Breakfast is served on porcelain, arranged by servants. Letters arrive by post, folded crisply and placed on silver trays. The factory hums beneath them, but barely registers. The family hears it as one might hear a clock ticking a background. Presence, predictable, contained. Children upstairs learn French, read poetry, and take piano lessons. Their shoes are polished, their collars pressed. They visit the park on Sundays, nodding politely to other families behind curtained carriages. Their games are quiet, their laughter muffled by thick rugs and proper manners. Their father works just below, but not among the machines. He keeps a ledger, attends meetings, and speaks in clipped tones about output and orders. Sometimes he walks the floor. More often, he watches from his office window. He does not see faces. He sees labor, necessary, distant. In the evenings, candles are lit. Tea is poured. A book is read aloud beside the hearth. Talk of business is kept minimal. A cousin's engagement, a new dressmaker, perhaps news from the continent. Beneath them, the machines have stopped. The children gone home. But upstairs, the world continues in its own time. The separation is not hostile. It is simply accepted. One world spins. The other observes. One sweats. The other listens to music. And yet, the floorboards creak the same way. The walls carry faint sounds. If you press your ear to the vent, you might still hear the factory's breath, like the slow exhale of something never fully forgotten. Now, as we leave this drawing room behind, let us ease gently into the present hand. reflect on the lives lived beneath smoke and silence. And now, as the final embers of our journey dim, we pause not to summarize, but simply to sit with what we've seen. The Industrial Revolution is often remembered in steam and steel, in engines and invention. But tonight, we look closer, slower, quieter. We began in the early hours of a factory day, walking in the small, tired steps of a child laborer. A broom in hand, a cold crust in a tin. The machines louder than thought, the hours indistinguishable. A childhood traded for survival. From there, we followed Robert Blinko. Not a crusader, but a boy who endured and then remembered. His story did not demand attention, but it asked for it, gently. A life set down in simple language, making space for the many who never told theirs. Then we entered stillness, the soft hush of an abandoned mill, where oil stains remain, where ledgers gather dust, where the past clings to brick and timber, not through sound but through silence. A different kind of memory, one that waits. And finally, we stood in comfort, among the velvet and wood of the drawing room, a place above the noise, shaped by good taste and soft hands, not evil, not unkind, just separate, one world above another. The weight of class held not in cruelty, but in assumption. Now, as you lie back, whether your eyes are already closed or just beginning to soften, you are not in the factory. You are not upstairs. You are here, present, still, and safe. Let history drift now, like smoke from a chimney long gone cold. Sleep well, traveler. Welcome, once again, to a slower kind of history. Wherever you are tonight, beneath soft blankets, beside the hush of a sleeping room, or simply letting your mind drift as the day fades, I invite you to listen, not for drama, but for the tale. Tonight, we go north, to the fjords, the ice-lined shorelines, and the smoke-darkened longhouses of the Viking world. But not the one you've seen in film. No axes raised, no shouts or burning villages. Instead, we'll meet the Vikings as they lived most days quietly, repeatedly, and close to the land. If you'd like, share the time and place your listening from in the comments below. But for now, let your breath slow and follow me to the edge of the water, where the day begins early and never easy. The wind arrives before the sun. It rustles the sod roof above you and pushes cold air through the gaps in the timber walls. You wake beneath a wool blanket that smells faintly of sheep and smoke. Your fingers are stiff, your breath visible. There is no fire yet, no warmth until you make it. You rise quietly. Others are still sleeping, your children, your brother, perhaps your father. The single-room longhouse is dim. You step carefully across packed earth, stirring embers in the hearth, adding splinters of wood, waiting for light. Outside, the grass is wet with dew. The goats bleat softly, impatient. You milk them while your feet grow numb. The chickens are restless, the nets need mending, and a section of the fence gave way in the night. You have tools to fix it, but they're old, passed down, repaired more than once. Breakfast is coarse barley porridge, warm but flavorless. If the catch was good yesterday, maybe there's dried fish to chew. The children eat quietly. There is no table, just benches, hands, and habit. The rest of the day is labor. Always labor. You chop wood. You haul water. You repair ropes, shape wooden bends, check traps, walk the hills for signs of grazing sheep. Sometimes, you join others to barter wool for salt, cheese for smoked herring. Money is rare. Most exchange is simple and face-to-face. Winters are long. The winds scream down the fjords for days without pause. Snow finds its way into corners. You insulate with straw, hang meat from beams, and hope the store of grain lasts. When someone gets sick, there is little to be done but wait. You do not raid. You do not sail west. You know of those men, but you are not one of them. You know the names of your land, not foreign kings. You have no armor, just wool, bone tools, and worn hands. You dream sometimes of warmer fields or softer beds, but mostly you sleep out of necessity. And in the morning, you do it again. Now, let us step away from this routine. Let us climb aboard a different kind of Viking vessel, one not bound for war, but for observation. Let us follow a the quiet navigator from the north. In the far north of Norway, near the edge of what was once thought of as the known world, lived a man named Othir. He was not a warrior, not a king. He owned ships. Yes, but not for conquest. His cargo was not plunder, but trade goods, seal skins, walrus ivory, ropes of whale hide, and quiet stories shaped by wind and snow. In the late 9th century, Othir sailed south not to raid, but to visit. He arrived at the court of King Alfred in England and spoke, gently, of his homeland. What survives of his voice is not dramatic. It is matter of fact, preserved in careful Old English by monks who listened to his tale and wrote it down. His world was cold, stretched, and filled with space. He told of reindeer herds tended by the Sami, of long winter nights, of sunless days and slow sailing under muted skies. Othir described sailing north to see how far the land reached, not because he had to, but because he was curious. He spoke of how his home was rich in animals, poor in grain. He explained how taxes were paid in furs, how fish were dried and traded, how land was less important than access to good harbor, to movement. The monks did not embellish his words. They simply translated them. And so, we're left with a short, clear record. A man of the sea, observant, precise, interested in geography and weather, and only distantly aware of politics. Othir reminds us that the Viking world was not solely a landscape of iron and fire. It was also made of maps traced in memory, of quiet conversations across distant courts, of hands roughened not by sword, but by sail, rope, and salt. Now, we return from his voyage not to conquest, but to domestic life. Let us step inside a longhouse and walk slowly through the details of how Vikings truly lived. The door creaks as it opens, low and thick, built more to keep out the wind than to welcome guests. You duck inside. It takes a moment for your eyes to adjust. The longhouse is dim, lit only by the soft flicker of a central fire pit. The smoke drifts upward toward a small vent in the turf-lined roof, curling into the dark wood beams above. The walls are made of timber, sealed with mud. They breathe in winter, creak in summer, and hold the scent of fire, sweat, and salted meat. Along both sides of the room are benches, covered in straw or fur, where the family sleeps, sits, and eats. There is no privacy, only thin woven screens, sometimes, for the elderly or the ill. Children nap where they can. The youngest clings to their mother's hip while she stirs a pot of fish stew over the coals. You move slowly through the room. Near the back, tools hang from pegs, iron shears, bone needles, wooden ladles. A woven basket holds dried herbs. A low shelf is lined with small carved toys, worn smooth from generations of play. Everything here has been mended many times. Nothing is wasted. Meals are plain and predictable. Barley porridge, dried fish, wild greens when available. Meat is reserved for feasts. Bread is dense, cooked on stones. You chew slowly, not because it's delicate, but because it lasts longer that way. The family works together. The men farm and fish. The women spin, weave, and manage food stores. Children begin helping early, gathering wood, minding animals. There is laughter sometimes, but softly, quickly. There are stories by firelight of spirits, of gods, of journeys far away. And then, there is sleep. The longhouse quiets before nightfall. Bodies lie close for warmth. The fire burns low. Outside, the wind howls across the fjord. Inside, breath slows in unison. This is not the Viking life of raids or sagas. It is the ordinary pulse of survival. A home shaped by weather, by patience, and by hands that work without rest. Now, let us shift our view. Across the sea, into a Frankish court, let us see how the Vikings were imagined from afar. Now we sit in a chamber far from the fjords inside a Frankish court, perhaps beneath the vaulted ceiling of a stone hall in Aachen or Reims. The walls are draped with colored cloth. Candles flicker against polished wood. A clerk reads from parchment, his voice slow and deliberate. The king listens. Nobles murmur. A monk adjusts his robes, waiting to record what's said next. They speak of the Norsemen. To the Franks, the Vikings were both terrifying and strange. Letters from abbots describe them as barbarians, pagans from the sea, with no respect for churches, no mercy for villages. Reports of raids came with breathless detail, burning monasteries, stolen relics, frightened peasants. The words chosen were always vivid, always uneasy. And yet, in these same records, there is fascination. The Norse were also noted for their ships, how fast they moved, how silently they arrived. Chroniclers describe the longbows as sleek, the warriors as disciplined, even when feared. Some wrote that they fought with terrifying precision. Others observed that they were not aimless, they came for silver, not slaughter. Within the court, speculation bloomed. What gods did they serve? Why did they not build cities? Could they be converted? Could they be paid to leave? While Viking farmers mended nets and herded goats, court scribes imagined them as untamed. While Norse women ground barley, noble ladies whispered rumors about blood rituals and strange tattoos. The Franks lived in worlds of order, calendars of saints, rows of pews, hierarchical chains of land and loyalty. The Viking world seemed wild by contrast, even when it wasn't. And so, behind the carved chairs and embroidered robes, the image of the Norse remained distorted, not incorrect, entirely but distant, filtered through fear, colored by difference. As we leave this courtly chamber behind, let us return once more to stillness, not to explain history, but to rest within its quiet contrasts. And so we drift back through the wind, over the fjords, through the firelight inside timber walls, through parchment and prayer in distant courts. The Viking world, so often cast in iron and flame, reveals itself instead in quiet rhythms, worn hands, and weathered tools. We began our journey beside the sea, waking early in the cold with a farmer who never touched a sword. We followed Othir, a merchant of few words, whose slow voyage across the northern seas was shaped not by conquest, but by curiosity. We stepped inside the longhouse not to shout, but to notice the low ceilings, the carved toys, the smell of fish and straw. And finally, we viewed the Norse from afar, through Frankish eyes that misunderstood, perhaps, but still watched closely. History is often louder than life, but here, we listen to the softness beneath the story, the scrape of a wooden bowl, the cough of a child at dawn, the shuffle of sandals across polished stone in a hall where the Vikings were spoken of, but not known. And now, as your own eyes grow heavy and the present reclaims its shape, you carry none of their burdens. There are no nets to mend, no goats to milk, no long winter ahead, only the stillness of your body, the quiet of this moment, and the fading echo of oars cutting softly through cold northern water. Sleep well, traveler. Tonight, we descend gently not into battlefields or mountain peaks, but into the quieter folds of ancient Greece. So often, Greek mythology is told with thunder and clash, with gods in golden halls and heroes beneath marble columns. But beneath the din, something softer lived, the quiet spirits, the lost sanctuaries, the daily breath of people whose names never reach the scrolls. As you listen, let the myths fade into background music. Let the silence stretch like a breeze across olive groves. Feel free to share the time and place you're listening from if you'd like. But for now, close your eyes, settle your breath, and come with me not to Olympus, but to its shadows. You are not Zeus. You do not command the sky. You are not Apollo, riding your chariot across the sun. You are a dryad, a spirit tied to a single tree, an oak or an ash. You live quietly, unnoticed, until a stranger swings an axe. And then, without fanfare, you vanish. No battle, no revenge, just silence. Your name was known to the villagers once. Perhaps they left small offerings, honey, fruit, a whisper before crossing your grove. But they do not tell your story in grand feasts. There are no songs, only hush. You were once sacred, then useful, then forgotten. The same was true for the naiads, the river nymphs, bound to springs, to shallow pools that dried in summer. When water was drawn respectfully, they were honored. But when drought came, or when a stream was diverted, their presence thinned until only myth remained. Even gods ignored you. You were part of the tapestry, but never the pattern. Your power was local, delicate, sometimes feared, but rarely praised. If a child drowned in your stream, you were blamed. If the wheat grew tall near your grove, it was the god Demeter who received thanks. You were not immortal. You lived as long as your tree, your stream, your cave endured. And when it faded, when stone cracked, when forest fell, you slipped from memory like mist from a hillside. In myth, you are background, but once, you were breath. Now, as we step out of this fading presence, we move toward a quieter form of reverence, toward temples not of noise or sacrifice but of sleep. You walk barefoot through a colonnade lined with flickering lamps. The air smells of herbs and warm stone. It is dusk, and your voice is no longer needed. You have come not to speak, not to be examined, but to sleep. This is the sanctuary of Asclepios, god of healing, and here, rest is the medicine. The priests say a little. They guide you gently, offering water and a light meal. You bathe in cool spring water, then change into clean linen. You do not bring a list of symptoms. You bring only your body, your breath, and the hope that Asclepios will visit in your dreams. Inside the temple's sleeping hall of a baton you find your place. It is quiet. Others lie nearby, wrapped and still, no beds, just mats, no fire, just warmth in the stone. Incense smolders softly in bronze bowls. You lie down. You close your eyes. The chants have ended. The doors are closed, and so begins the practice of incubation. The belief is simple, but deep, that the god or his sacred snake will come to you as you sleep, showing you what ails you, or perhaps how to heal. Some dream of gentle hands, others of rivers or birds or strange, glowing lights. And when you wake, you tell your dream to the priest. He listens without interruption, then guides your next steps: diet, exercise, ritual, prayer. This is healing as reflection, not cutting or potions. Just pause, silence, the letting in of something beyond diagnosis. Some pilgrims stay for days, some for weeks. They walk the grounds, sit under trees, offer gifts in the shrine. They watch snakes glide across warm tiles, believed to be the children of Asclepios, sacred and unstartled by human presence. And then, when the body and mind have calmed, they return home. The temples are ruins now, the snakes gone. But in the cracks of those ancient stones, the air still seems soft, like the place once knew how to hold sleep gently and with purpose. Now, let us leave the sanctuary and walk further into quiet toward a forgotten temple, far from cities and gods with loud names. You follow a narrow path through the Arcadian hills, the air warm with pine and wild thyme. The trees thin, and you arrive not at a marble colonnade, but a scatter of stones nestled in grass. Here stood the temple of Despoina, daughter of Demeter, whose name means simply the mistress. Not Athena, not Hera, a quieter goddess, one worshipped only here, in this place, known mostly to those who lived nearby. The sanctuary was never grand. It was shaped by the landscape, not in defiance of it. Terraces carved into slopes, altars simple and undecorated. The rituals were local, private. There were no grand processions from Athens, no choral hymns composed for theater, only worn steps, footpaths, and the flicker of oil lamps carried by shepherds and mothers at dusk. Little survives now, a few columns, an inscription half lost to lichen. But when archaeologists brushed away the earth, they found a cult statue large, imposing, oddly abstract. A goddess with an animal mask, her form unfamiliar to modern eyes, her mystery intact. Despoina was linked to fertility, to secrets, to silence. She received offerings not just of grain and honey, but of quiet presence. Worshippers would sit beside her temple walls, whisper prayers into soil, leave tokens tucked between stones. There was no audience, no applause. Her temple eventually faded, forgotten by emperors, missed by scribes. Nature returned. Trees grew through cracks, moss softened altars, and the road to her sanctuary vanished from maps. But now and then, someone walks the path again. They stand among the stones, not to seek miracles, but to feel the air, to wonder what it was like to pray not to Olympus, but to the earth itself, to serve a goddess who asks for nothing loud. As we leave Despoina's hidden world behind, we step now into the lives of the ordinary, the potters, the herders, those who lived alongside myth without needing to retell it. The gods may live on Mount Olympus, but at its foot, life unfolds in quieter ways. You are a young potter, rising early while the mist still hugs the foothills. Your workshop is small, shaded by fig trees. The clay is coarse at first, sticky between your fingers, but it softens with water and patience. You sit cross-legged beside the wheel, shaping bowls, jars, lamps, each with a curve learned from your mother's hands. You hum as you work, not a hymn, but something remembered. The gods are not far from your thoughts, but they are not your audience. The kiln must be hot. The ash must settle just right. The pot must dry slowly, or it will crack. Nearby, a shepherd walks with his flock. His feet know the slope of every ridge. He carries a staff worn smooth by time, and a flute carved years ago from river reed. As he walks, he watches the sky. He knows when rain will come, when wolves will follow. His prayers are short, a nod to Hermes for safe passage, a whisper to Pan when the wind turns cold. His day is long, but not lonely. The sheep follow. The sun moves. He returns by dusk, and then, in a home built of stone and straw, a woman stirs a pot of lentils. She listens to her grandfather retell the myths of Persephone and the seasons of brave Odysseus lost at sea. She knows the stories well, but they soothe her still. Tomorrow, she'll wake early to grind grain. She'll fetch water from the spring and stretch linen across the frame. But tonight, she listens, slowly blinking near the fire. For these people, the gods are real, but so are cracked heels. So is hunger. So is the softness of olive oil rubbed into tired skin. They don't ask for lightning bolts, just good weather, just health, just a quiet day that ends in sleep. And so, we leave them there, not in marble halls or epic poems, but in rhythm, in breath, in lives both humble and whole. Now, let us close our eyes with them and return softly to the present. And now, as the olive branches sway gently in the imagined breeze, and the last embers of myth burn low, we come to rest not at the feet of gods, but beside those who lived quietly in their shadows. We begin not with thunder, but with the fading breath of a tree spirit, a nymph who existed only as long as her stream flowed or her oak stood. A reminder that mythology is not only made of battles and crowns, but of presence brief and unnoticed. Then we entered the temple of Asclepios, where healing came not through war or ritual fire, but through rest. We lay in silence, waiting for the god to speak in dreams. A medicine made of pause and breath, practiced by bodies weary, but not yet broken. From there, we climbed the hidden paths of Arcadia, where Despoina's sanctuary once stood. No marble, no procession, just stone and shadow, and a goddess whose face remains veiled. A mystery held gently, not solved. And finally, we walked with the forgotten many. The potter, the herder, the grain grinder who listens to myth before bed. Their gods were near, but their days were their own. Their hands held not weapons, but bread and brush and wool. Their lives, unsung but not unworthy. Now, as your own breath slows and your eyelids grow heavier, may these quiet stories rest beside you. You carry no myths on your shoulders tonight, only the softness of routine and the rhythm of a world once full of voices that asked only to be remembered gently. Sleep well, traveler. Welcome, once again, to a slower journey through the past. Tonight, we walk the roads of empire, not the grand processions or Senate debates, but the dustier edges. The Roman Empire was vast, complex, and disciplined. But for most who lived within it, life was not carved in marble. It was worn into sandals. As always, feel free to tell us what time you're listening. Perhaps it's late evening in New Zealand, or dawn is just breaking in Brazil. But for now, settle in. Let your breath grow long and even, and join me on a quiet Roman road at sunrise, where a man shifts his satchel, tightens his cloak, and begins his day. The light is gray and cold. Your body is sore before you've taken your first step. You slept beside your satchel near a post milestone, wrapped in wool that's grown stiff with sweat and dew. Your sandals, once thick, now thin across the soles. But there's no time to wait. You rise, adjust the strap across your chest, and begin walking. You are tabellarius, a courier in service to Rome. You carry messages, scrolls with military orders, financial tallies, legal summons. Some are sealed with wax, some are wrapped in leather. Some are chained to your belt so they're not lost in your sleep. Most are not meant for you to read, but you sometimes do, quietly. Just a glimpse, just a name. The road is well paved, but long, flat in parts, cracked in others. You move at a set pace. Not too fast, you must last the day. Not too slow, or questions will come. There are ends, yes, but space is limited and coin runs thin. You eat what you brought: hard bread, dried figs, a sip of sour wine. Water, when found, tastes of clay. Salt mines your face before midday. Along the road, others pass you: soldiers, traders, tax collectors. Most do not speak. The sun climbs high. Your mind begins to blur. You repeat the route in your head, counting markers. 14, 15, 16. The delay means suspicion. A lost scroll could mean lashes. If you are lucky, you reach your destination by nightfall. You hand off your messages to a clerk, who nods without looking. No thanks, just another assignment. If you're unlucky, the gate is closed. You sleep outside. You are part of Rome, but you do not vote, or command, or feast. You move. That is all. You are not remembered. You are barely noticed. And tomorrow, you'll walk again. Now, let us shift away from the road and into a quieter story. One not carved in stone, but in careful service. Let us follow a Roman official whose victories were once important and are now nearly forgotten. He once commanded legions. His name was spoken in war tents, written in dispatches, and carried across provinces by men like the courier we just followed. Gaius Suetonius Paulinus, governor, general, consul. But now, his story rests in the quiet corners of scrolls few people read. His victories mattered briefly, then faded like footsteps in gravel. He is best remembered for one thing: crushing the rebellion of Boudica in Britannia. It was brutal, efficient, and recorded with Roman pride. But even then, Suetonius did not seek spectacle. He was methodical, calculating, a man of roads and logistics, less admired for glory than for outcomes. He had served in Mauritania before that, Africa, in Roman terms, a place of long marches and dust. He crossed the Atlas Mountains, pushed campaigns into difficult terrain, and sent back letters full of troop movements, not poetry. He was the kind of commander the empire liked: steady, unromantic, reliable. But politics in Rome shifted quickly. After his suppression of Boudica's revolt, Suetonius fell from favor quietly, as such things often happened. He was replaced, reassigned. The winds of imperial attention turned elsewhere. His career didn't end in disgrace. It simply ended. There are no statues to him in Rome, no surviving letters, no grand accounts in marble relief. His name appears mostly in the writings of Tacitus' spare lines, noting his discipline, his decisiveness, his fall. And yet, for years, he shaped the world around him. He governed provinces. He signed orders. He moved armies like brushstrokes across a map. Thousands lived or died by his decisions. But history remembered only a few paragraphs. He is not tragic. He is not forgotten entirely. But like many in Rome, he was important until he wasn't. Now, let us walk downward, not metaphorically, but literally. Beneath the roads, beneath the forums, into the silent necropolises where names were carved, then worn smooth by time. Beneath the clatter of hooves and sandals, below the marble steps and shouting vendors, there was always another Rome, a quieter one, a city of the dead. The necropolis is stretched beyond the gates, along the old roads via Appia, via Flaminia, via Latina. Tombs line the sides like watchers. Some are grand, with columns and inscriptions. Others, no more than a stone slab. Most were somewhere in between, built not for pride, but for peace. You walk softly now, through one of these cities of silence. The air is cooler, heavier. The torchlight flickers gently across faded frescoes, scenes of fruit, of animals, of families eating together. You read the names carved above niches. Many are unfamiliar. Some are worn smooth. A few still carry the echo of voice. To Marcus, baker of the 3rd district. To Livia, mother of 2, gone too soon. Simple lives, honored in stillness. Here lie midwives, potters, scribes, freedmen who saved enough to purchase a tomb, children who died before their 2nd year, soldiers who survived battle, but not illness, a servant buried beside her mistress, their names listed side by side, a dog's paw print pressed into dried mortar near a low altar. Offerings remain, sometimes coins, sometimes beads, sometimes tiny vessels of oil. They sit undisturbed, dust-covered, but present, proof that someone, once, returned here with memory, with grief. Further below, in catacombs, the walls are lined with niches, locally each once filled with remains. The air smells of earth and time. The silence is complete, save for your own breath and the faint drip of water from an unseen crack. This was not a place of fear for the Romans. It was transition, a resting place. Names continued in soft prayer. Tombs visited on feast days. Death was present, but not distant. The dead were not gone. They were near. And above all this, the dust, the echo, the carved laments. Life went on. Senates met. Orders were shouted. Bread was baked. But beneath, the empire kept its memories in stone and shadow. Let us now climb from these corridors, into sunlight, into quiet wealth. Let us visit the stillness of a senator's home, where the empire felt far away, even as it hummed outside the walls. The floors are cool and polished. Your sandals make no sound as you walk. Light pours in through a row of open arches, filtered by gauze curtains that stir with the breeze. A fountain trickles gently in the central atrium. The sound is constant, measured, soothing. This is not the noise of the forum, or the barracks, or the bakery. This is the home of a Roman senator. And it is quiet. He reclines on a low couch, draped in fine linen. A cup of spiced wine rests in his hand. Nearby, a servant fans the air slowly with woven palm fronds. Another waits, silently holding a tray of sliced fruit and olives. No orders are spoken. Everything is understood. The senator lifts his eyes to the ceiling. There is nothing urgent today. In another room, scribes work without speaking. Letters are copied. Ledgers balanced. A physician checks on an aging relative in the corner chamber. The smell of cedar and lavender drifts from an open jar. Musicians rehearse a soft melody on strings barely audible, just enough to color the silence. Outside, Rome moves. Carts rattle over stone. News is shouted from corners. Laws are read aloud in basilicas. But here, none of that reaches. The walls are thick, the windows small. The world is curated, controlled. The senator receives messages throughout the day on wax tablets, on scrolls. Some he reads. Most are set aside. He has clerks for that. Decisions are made, but rarely rushed. Time is a luxury he possesses in abundance. He bathes in the afternoon, first warm, then cool. Scented oils are rubbed into his arms. His body is aging, but well tended. His thoughts are slow, confident, habitual. In the evening, he may dine with guests or eat alone while a reader recites from Virgil or Cicero. He knows of the empire's weight, its legions, its revolts, its taxes. But he does not feel it, not like the messenger, not like the soldier. His empire arrives as parchment, as rumor, as something managed from a distance. And so, he rests. Now, as we draw this story to a close, we step away from his marble halls and back into ourselves, quiet, breathing, and still. We began our walk in motion. Alongside a courier, whose feet wore down the empire's roads more than any army. His life was not carved in triumphal arches, but in blisters, lost sleep, and the quiet weight of orders that were never his to question. Then we trace the quiet career of Gaius Suetonius Paulinus, a name once spoken in tents and scrolls, now resting beneath the dust of history. His victories mattered, briefly, and then, like so many, he faded. We descended into silence into the necropolises where Rome kept its memories. The baker, the mother, the soldier's daughter. Their tombs were small, their names chipped away, but their presence remains, tucked softly beneath the streets. And finally, we sat in stillness beside a senator, surrounded by quiet wealth, perfumed calm, and curated distance from the noise that shaped the empire. His Rome was orderly, clean, and measured, but only within its walls. These lives were not mythic. They were not loud, but they were real, threaded together in one great machine that stretched from desert to forest, from mountains to sea. As you now lie still, you two are part of a quiet empire, one not of conquest, but of rest. There are no roads to walk tonight, no scrolls to carry, only breath, and the gentle crumbling of time into sleep. Sleep well, traveler. Welcome, once more, to a gentler kind of history. Tonight, we enter a world built on silence. Not the peaceful, meditative quiet of modern imagination, but a silence that was cold, strict, and deeply human. The medieval monastery, far from romantic, full of routine, hunger, and whispered prayers beneath stone ceilings. As always, feel free to leave a comment if you'd like. Tell me what time it is where you are, or what moment in the night this finds you. But for now, draw the blankets closer. Let the noise of the day fall away. We are walking barefoot across a flagstone floor. The candles flicker. The bell is about to ring and your novice robe is too thin. You are 13 years old. Your hair has just been shaved. The back of your neck feels raw beneath the hood. The robe they gave you is coarse and far too long. It trails behind you, catching dust as you walk. The others do not speak to you, not because they are cruel, but because they are not allowed. You sleep in a dormitory with 30 others. No mattresses, just wooden planks and folded wool. There is no heat. The stone walls drip of moisture when the frost comes. You are woken before sunrise by the bell, always the bell. A deep, heavy sound that echoes through your ribs. You shuffle into line, hands tucked beneath sleeves. No shoes. Your breath rises in clouds. You kneel in the chapel, your knees pressing into cold tile. The prayer is in Latin. You know the words, but not what they mean. Your mind drifts, but your posture must not. Breakfast is silent. A bowl of porridge, no seasoning, no warmth by the fire, only warmth from your neighbor's elbow, and even that is discouraged. You glance at the monks at the high table, but never too long. You eat quickly. You do not speak. Your chores fill the rest of the morning. Today, you clean the scriptorium floor. Tomorrow, you might sweep the cloister or carry water from the well. You are expected to work hard, speak little, and pray often. You are not here to be known. You are here to be shaped. Some days, you write letters you do not understand. You learn to sharpen quills, to fold parchment, but your hands tremble. You drop a scroll once. No one punishes you, but no one comforts you either. You miss your family, the bread your mother used to bake, the dog that used to follow you, the way your name used to be said with kindness. But now, you are brother, nothing more, and winter is only just beginning. Now, let us move from this boy cold, quiet, and unseen to another figure. One older, more practiced, but just as silent. Let us follow Brother Anselm, a scribe whose voice lived only through ink. He sits by the window, where the light is steady but never direct. The table before him is scarred with years of quiet effort. Its edges smooth, worn down by elbows, by parchment, by patience. Brother Anselm is not young anymore. His back aches if he bends too long, and his eyes water if the sun shifts too sharply. But still, he writes. He does not preach. He does not garden. His life is lived at the tip of a quill cut fresh from goose feather. Dipped into ink, he mixes himself. Gall, oak, ash, a recipe passed down. The ink is dark, slightly green at first, then black as it dries. He moves slowly. Every letter must be shaped with care. Mistakes are not allowed. There is no way to erase. His task today is a homily. Yesterday it was a psalm. Last week, a list of fish from the cellar. The words are not his. They belong to others, bishops, scholars, saints. But his hand gives them form. Day after day, year after year, around the margins of his work, sometimes something slips through. A vine, a fish, a bird drawn mid-flight, just for himself. A tiny face, smiling faintly from the corner of a page. Nothing too bold, just enough to make him smile, privately, before turning the page and beginning again. He eats alone most days, or among others who do not speak. Bread, cheese, a cup of thin ale. He prays before and after. He thanks God for vision, for ink, for light. He never expects his work to be read, only to be completed. His name does not appear on the pages. It is not meant to, but his hand lives in the curves, in the rhythm of the script, in the steadiness of line after line, copied not for glory, but for faith. And one day, the book he copies may be carried far away to a cathedral, to a library, or perhaps buried in a chest. But his body will remain here, beneath the stone floor, where the candles flicker and the dust settles slowly in the light. Now, we leave his desk and step outside. The monastery has long since emptied. The roof is gone. The chants are over, but the silence remains. Let us walk the ruins and listen. The wind moves gently through empty arches. Moss grows where incense once rose. You walk carefully over uneven flagstones, the walls around you broken by ivy and years. The roof is gone. The bells are silent, but the shape of the monastery remains. A row of stone columns marks the cloister walk. Your footsteps echo lightly as you follow the path where monks once walked in silence, robes brushing softly against the stone. To your left, the remains of the chapter house its benches crumbled, its doorway open the sky. To your right, a basin carved into the wall, still smooth where hands once washed before prayer. You pass through the old refectory. The floor is damp, scattered with leaves. A bird flits through an open window, then out again. You can almost imagine the long table that once stood here, bowls of lentil stew, clay mugs of ale, eaten in silence while a single monk read scripture aloud from a raised platform. The dormitory above is now open to the weather. The beams long gone. The staircases still rise, but lead nowhere. In the corner, a fireplace its soot stains faint but visible. A single wild flower grows through the crack in the stone hearth, reaching toward a light once blocked by roof tiles and timber. You linger in the chapel, where the air is cooler. A few wall carvings remain, faint outlines of saints, their eyes worn smooth by wind and rain. The altar is broken, but still, it feels like a sacred space. Not because of ritual, but because of stillness. Because time has paused here. Not ended, just slowed. This place once echoed with chants, with footsteps, with whispered prayers. Now it echoes with birdsong, with breeze, with your own quiet breath. As we leave the ruins, we turn toward contrast, toward the rooms that were warmer, the meals that were softer. Let us walk now to the abbot's table, behind the curtain. It is mealtime, but the abbot does not enter the main hall. While the brothers file in silently, hands folded, bowls in hand, he remains behind a heavy curtain. The warmth here is different. A brazier glows near the wall. The stone floor is covered in woven mats. The table is set. A servant, a lay brother, younger, brings in the tray. Roasted fish, not boiled. A bit of spiced wine, not thin ale. The bread is softer, crusted. Beside it, a wedge of aged cheese, a dish of olives, and a slice of pear, still cool from the cellar. The abbot eats in silence, but not with discomfort. He is not greedy. He is not unkind, but his role gives him different air to breathe. His room is warmer. His sheets are linen, not rough wool. He has a writing desk with better light, a collection of books no one else may touch, and the right to speak when others may not. While the brothers eat under stone vaults, the abbot dines beneath a painted ceiling. He finishes his meal slowly, dabs his mouth with a cloth, and gives thanks with a voice allowed to rise above a whisper. Later, he may receive a visitor, another abbot, perhaps, or a local noble. They'll speak in Latin, exchange small scrolls, perhaps discuss land boundaries or matters of the bishopric. A monk will wait in the corner, quiet, holding wine in a carved flask. The abbot sleeps in a small chamber with its own fire. He rises early, yes, and prays with the others, but his hands are smooth. His ink does not smudge. His path through the monastery is unblocked by duty. This is not cruelty. It is contrast. And even in this house of vows and rules, where poverty is praised and silence kept, some eat behind curtains and others serve. Now, as we leave his room and return to stillness, let us bring these stories together, so different, and yet quietly held within the same walls. And now, as the candle gutters low and the last bell of Compline fades into stone, we come to the close of this quiet walk through monastic life. We began with a boy shivering in the dark, silent in a room of silent others. He did not speak, not because he lacked words, but because the rules had taken them. His world was hunger, prayer, repetition. Then we met Brother Anselm bent over parchment, his fingers stained with ink, his thoughts measured in lines of Latin script. A man whose name did not matter, but whose strokes still live in pages that outlasted his bones. We wandered through ruins, next through walls without roofs, through staircases that rise into sky, through basilicas now filled with grass and birdsong, a place where history breathes gently, without urgency, where silence lingers longer than memory. And finally, we sat briefly at the abbot's table, behind curtains, beside warmth, a space of comfort, quiet power, and quiet distance, not as judgment, but as reminder. Even in places devoted to humility, distinction remains. So now, as your own thoughts begin to soften, as your room darkens and your breath deepens, you carry none of their burdens. You are not bound by bells. You will no vow. There are no cold stones beneath your feet tonight, only warmth, only stillness, only rest, sleep. Well, traveler,